India is the future. A young country with the manpower and resources to shape the course of the world. Over the years, it has shown that it can walk its talk when it comes to breaking new grounds and bringing revolutionary changes in the country. As the 75th year approaches, it is time to celebrate these milestones. Let's commit to a new future that carries everyone forward at the same pace. A future defined by a vision that is at once bold, imaginative, and inclusive. Such a vision exists in the form of India at 75. It was drawn up by the people of India in 2008 during one of the largest visioning exercises of its kind, led by the Confederation of Indian Industry. The vision reflected the people's aspiration for their country. Over the years, CII has been bringing different groups together so that they can work to help the country towards these milestones, directly or indirectly. It has been a fulfilling journey thus far. It is now time to celebrate how far our country has come since it first flew its flag as a free nation. Become a part of India at 75 celebration and commit yourself to collaborating for a strong and inclusive nation. These are a few things you can do in your capacity as an individual or an organization. Volunteer and encourage volunteering. Proactively engage with other stakeholders to find solutions to some of India's most pressing problems. Invest in building social awareness and capital. Support activities generating optimism, hope, and pride for national achievements for 75 years. Let's again make a tryst with destiny and pledge our present for a stronger tomorrow. When the future generations look back, let it be with the knowledge that when India thinks it can, it does.
From humble roots in Finland to over 110 years in the making. From one machine shop in 1910 to spanning across over 140 countries and more. From 12 state-of-the-art global production sites to 8 advanced R&D centers around the world. From over 1.4 million active installed units to serving over 1 billion people every day. We are KONE, the global leader in elevators and escalators. We are guided by our strong mission to improve the flow of urban life. To this effect, we have always imbibed safety, quality, and sustainability into our operations to help our customers make the best of world's cities, buildings, and public spaces, true to our vision to create the best people flow experience. Our Indian roots date back to 1984, and today KONE continues to be a forerunner in the elevator and escalator industry with over 5,000 employees and regional offices spread across 4 major cities in India. Our state-of-the-art factory located in Sri Perumbudur near Chennai is India, South and Southeast Asia's largest elevator manufacturing facility, delivering products and solutions not only pan-India but also to neighboring countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. We owe our breakthrough innovations to our 8 global technology centers. The ones in India that work for global and Indian innovations are located in Chennai and Pune. These world-class technology centers work together with customers, partners and research institutes to provide the best-in-class people flow solutions. Our path-breaking experience centers spread across India elevate customer experiences with real-life interactive sessions displaying our technological and aesthetic capabilities. Our newly launched iRefresh series takes ode from the elements of nature and can complement every building's unique style with its vibrant and energetic design aesthetics and themes. An elevator needs to evolve with use, and our new range of Kone DX class elevators are a game changer in this regard. Pioneering built-in digital connectivity, intuitive ambient lighting and sound, along with touchless application performing interface, AI-powered network support and services, and 24/7 advanced people flow solutions for monitoring and access control. We have been associated with the best across segments, religiously following our core ethos of promoting sustainable success with customers. Kone Centennial Foundation, a global non-profit organization, we continue to support issues spanning social, economic, environmental, and humanitarian concerns. We are especially proud of our collaboration with Chitkara University in Punjab, offering the youths a learning course in elevator technology with prospective employment opportunities within Kone. Our Green Dream wall painting campaign aims at sensitizing people on key environmental issues while beautifying the neglected walls across India and support Swachh Bharat mission. It also provides a means of livelihood to the local painters and artists. We're an organization of many firsts, such as machine roomless elevator, high-rise lamps, ultra rope, eco-disc motor, jump lift construction time, 24/7 cloud-based connected services. We are pioneers, innovators, creators. We are driven, motivated, empowered. We are here to make your journey safe, reliable, and memorable. Kone, dedicated to people flow.
When it comes to monitoring security, every environment is unique. Security professionals must maintain persistent awareness to keep people, assets, and environments safe. This means staying active, engaged, and focused. Introducing Safer for Security, the premier facial recognition platform for live video that will take your security to a new level. Safer gives security professionals advanced situational awareness with best-in-class AI-powered facial recognition that's tuned for performance and accuracy. Safer can detect and match millions of faces in real time, even under the most challenging conditions. All data is encrypted, in transit or at rest. Live analytics provide actionable insights, such as traffic volume, demographic compositions, dwell time, and more. Safer can be paired with a video management system to provide vigilant 24/7 monitoring across multiple video feeds. Live overlays show exactly who is on camera. Alerts and notifications are fully customizable, and bookmarks with searchable metadata make investigative work faster and more effective. With highly accurate AI-powered facial recognition, Safer for Security provides a new level of visibility and assurance, so you can better protect your people, facilities, and valuable assets. Secure, accurate facial recognition. Safer for Security from Real Networks.
From humble roots in Finland to over 110 years in the making. From one machine shop in 1910 to spanning across over 140 countries and more. From 12 state-of-the-art global production sites to 8 advanced R&D centers around the world. From over 1.4 million active installed units to serving over 1 billion people every day. We are KONE, the global leader in elevators and escalators. We are guided by our strong mission to improve the flow of urban life. To this effect, we have always imbibed safety, quality, and sustainability into our operations to help our customers make the best of world's cities, buildings, and public spaces, true to our vision to create the best people flow experience. Our Indian roots date back to 1984, and today KONE continues to be a forerunner in the elevator and escalator industry with over 5,000 employees and regional offices spread across 4 major cities in India. Our state-of-the-art factory located in Sri Perumbudur near Chennai is India, South and Southeast Asia's largest elevator manufacturing facility, delivering products and solutions not only pan-India, but also to neighboring countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. We owe our breakthrough innovations to our 8 global technology centers. The ones in India that work for global and Indian innovations are located in Chennai and Pune. These world-class technology centers work together with customers, partners, and research institutes to provide the best-in-class people flow solutions. Our path-breaking experience centers spread across India elevate customer experiences with real-life interactive sessions displaying our technological and aesthetic capabilities. Our newly launched iRefresh series takes ode from the elements of nature and can complement every building's unique style with its vibrant and energetic design aesthetics and themes. An elevator needs to evolve with use, and our new range of KONE DX Class elevators are a game changer in this regard. Pioneering built-in digital connectivity, intuitive ambient lighting and sound, along with touchless application performing interface, AI-powered network support and services, and 24/7 advanced people flow solutions for monitoring and access control. We have been associated with the best across segments, religiously following our core ethos of promoting sustainable success with customers. Through KONE Centennial Foundation, a global non-profit organization, we continue to support issues spanning social, economic, environmental, and humanitarian concerns. We are especially proud of our collaboration with Chitkara University in Punjab, offering the youth a learning course in elevator technology with prospective employment opportunities within KONE. Our Green Dream wall painting campaign aims at sensitizing people on key environmental issues while beautifying the neglected walls across India and support Swachh Bharat mission. It also provides a means of livelihood to the local painters and artists. We're an organization of many firsts, such as machine roomless elevator, high-rise lamps, ultra row, eco-disc motor, jump lift construction time, 24/7 cloud-based connected services. We are pioneers, innovators, creators. We are driven, motivated, empowered. We are here to make your journey safe, reliable, and memorable. Kone, dedicated to people flow.
I request Saket to begin with the proceeding, please.
Sure. Thank you, Rajat, and a very good evening to everyone. I'm Saket Mehra from Grant Thornton, and I'll be the host and the moderator for this session 5 of CII Intelligent 2021 series. First of all, many congratulations to CII for hosting this wonderful event, and CII along with Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, and Department of Science and Technology is hosting this two-day event wherein some very important topics have been discussed over the last 2 days. This session is about smart mobility, the future of smart mobility. And the way we have structured this session is that I'll just set the context for 5 odd minutes. Then we'll request our eminent speakers and panelists, whom I'll be introducing very shortly, to come and share their views about what they believe is something important from a smart mobility standpoint in India. And predominantly, we'll be covering three critical aspects. One is from a regulatory standpoint, what is really important. We would be talking more from a transportation sector standpoint as to what the ecosystem really requires us to contribute. And then, more importantly, how technology is going to play a significant role in this massive transportation is the other aspect that we will be covering in our panel discussion. So that's a broader outline of our conversation over the next 60 or 70 odd minutes. We are just waiting for some more panelists to join in. Rajat, do we start or do we wait further? Sure. I think in the interest of time, what we'll do is, I'll just set the context. So over the last 2 days, I would say there have been very interesting sessions, as I said. We heard the panelists and the eminent speakers talking about intelligent living as to how our homes have become much smarter, how through adoption of technologies like IoT, machine learning, artificial intelligence, the ease of living has been an integral part of our ecosystem of our lives. We also heard these speakers talking about the manufacturing 4.0 as to how the shop floor operations have also undergone a significant shift by use of technology. And finally, we also heard the speakers talking about the connected cities. And very important themes which came out from that discussion was around digital governance and safety and security. When we use transportation or the entire ecosystem. So I think predominantly what it means is that there are two emerging themes which have come out from these discussions. One is from a technology standpoint as to how the technology is playing such a significant role. And second is more in terms of how do we look at adopting a much cleaner mode of transportation or a much safer mode of transportation. So these are the two basic themes which have emerged from the broader outline or from the broader discussion that we had. If you look at from a technology standpoint, technology is something which is growing at a much faster rate, at an exponential rate, and the impact of the technological advancement is something which cannot be quantified in true sense in today's environment. And it is up to really the business owners as to how they want to adapt and adopt technology. At the same time, they always run a risk of losing their customers or losing the business if they were not get aligned to the use of technology. I'll just put a small presentation as to what we believe. Yeah. So what now, if you look at from a transportation sector standpoint, I think globally as well as in India, transportation as a sector accounts for almost 23% to 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions which take place. And electric vehicles certainly play a very significant role in transitioning to a much cleaner and a much safer mobility option. And worldwide, the electric vehicles have been growing at a CAGR of almost 25% plus percentage on an overall basis. Now, what it really means is the smart mobility, when we talk about it, is more about rethinking of the transportation infrastructure, which is used in our day-to-day life. It's more about how the entire ecosystem comprising of technology, comprising of transportation system, comprising of, more importantly, the regulatory framework come together and offer the users a much safer, secured, and a cleaner way of transportation. Worldwide, we have seen, because of multiple factors, something like the consumer behavior towards much safer mode of transportation. We have seen people actually moving towards moving towards not adopting private car ownership, and also mobility as a service, which has been seen as a rapid increase in most parts of the globe, has resulted into India also to think about these smarter options of transportation. Uh, what we've also seen as far as the technology is concerned, telematics, which is playing a very critical role, and which will also play a very critical role in bringing out those operational practices, in bringing out the improvements on the bottom line. And it is expected that by 2025, almost 90 million of the commercial vehicles would be connected to telematics, with a market size of telematic business itself exceeding $90 billion. So that's the extent of the opportunities which really exist for all of us, I mean, for the entire ecosystem. And there are four broad themes which are emerging. Number one is the renewable source of energy, which is coming out to be a significant contributor in this transformation journey. Second is the incentivization, which will promote the adaptability of electric vehicles. The third is the need and the requirement for the new or the future skill sets that we have. And fourth is the supply chain ecosystem, which will offer innovation quality for us to sustain this emerging technology. So that's the broader outline of our discussion. And now what we'll do is we'll just quickly um,
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
sorry. So what we'll do is now with this, we'll just go about introducing the panelist, and I'll go in an alphabetical manner in terms of introducing the panelist. So first, we have Mr. Abhilesh Kumar with us. Welcome, Mr. Abhilesh Kumar. Mr. Abhilesh Kumar is a director for business development, India and Southeast Asia, South Asia, Uber. He's an ex McKinsey and ex Flipkart executive who currently heads the business development at Uber for its India and the South Asia region. He has been instrumental in setting up and scaling the businesses during his professional career, and loves to put the end consumer at the center of the decision making. So welcome, Mr. Abhilesh Kumar. Next, we have Mr. Amit Bhatt, who's the executive director at WRI India. Amit is based out of Delhi and provides vision and leadership to all the transport initiatives across WRI in India and neighboring countries. Amit has close to 20 years of experience in the field of integrated transport, electric mobility, road safety, street design, and urban development. Welcome, Amit. Next, we have Mr. Biswajit Biswas. Mr. Biswajit is the Chief Data Scientist at Tata Elixir. He heads the Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence, responsible for driving innovation in digital systems for communication, media, and transportation business verticals. Before heading data science team, he was responsible for wireless communication, multimedia systems, digital signal processing, image, video, and audio coding, and machine vision systems. Welcome, Mr. Biswas, for the panel to the panel discussion. Next, we have Mr. Naveen Munjal with us. Welcome, Mr. Munjal. Mr. Munjal is the Managing Director of Hero Electric Vehicles Private Limited. As an entrepreneur, he is widely recognized in shaping the Indian electric two-wheeler market, as well as his contribution to various forums in the electric vehicle space, both in India as well as globally. He has built the Hero Electric as a brand into a leading manufacturer and market leader in the sector, in the electric vehicles and two-wheeler market in India. Welcome, Mr. Munjal. Next, we have Mr. Nishant Arya. Mr. Nishant Arya is the VP Emerging Tech and R&D, JBM Group. Mr. Arya is the Vice Chairman of the $2 billion Indian conglomerate, JBM Group, enriched with education from Bradford University, UK, and London School of Economics. He has been instrumental in transforming the group since 2010. Mr. Arya has worked in various multinational companies within Europe and Japan for 2 years. These stints have given him exposure to business, to global processes and work culture, and he regards this as a great learning experience. Under his leadership, JBM introduced India's first true low-floor city bus, City Life, that is already redefining the dynamics of the public transportation with its first kind of innovative features that ensure enhanced comfort, safety, security for the commuters. Welcome, Mr. Arya, to the panel discussion. Next, we have Ms. Rushida Majid, who's the India representative at Bernard Veer Lear Foundation. She has helped manage the Bloomberg Philanthropies India Smart Cities Challenge, a competition to select 100 cities for central government fundings as part of the country's Smart Cities mission. Rushida has led research in 11 countries for Princeton University's Innovations for Successful Societies to analyze reforms that improve government performance and accountability. She has also served as a core team member on the re-election campaign of a two-term member of parliament, advised a World Bank team on case study research, and managed a global leadership program for New York City-based nonprofit organizations. Thank you, Rishida, for joining us. I think we'll have many things to learn from you. Last but not the least, we also have Mr. Subhendu J. Sinha, who's the advisor to Niti Aayog. Welcome and good evening, Mr. Sinha. Mr. Sinha has an experience of over 27 years in operations, infrastructure, planning, coordination, and management at field and policy making levels in Indian Railways with considerable success and appreciation. His performance has been recognized and awarded twice at the national level, as well as he also was awarded for the National Award for Outstanding Service, Ministry of Railways, Government of India in 2006. He has also served as the Dean for the Indian Railway Institute of Transport Management, Lucknow, and General Manager Web Applications at the Center of Railway Informatics Information Systems. He has training and enrichment from Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Germany, and the US. Welcome, Mr. Sinha, to the panel. So I think what we'll now do is, I understand Mr. Sinha has some commitment, so maybe I'll straight away move on to Mr. Sinha and would like to seek his views on the future of smart mobility. And particularly, Mr. Sinha, if you could touch upon the reforms, more from a public policy support framework, be it the FAME policy, be it the PLI, which got announced for the automobile sector. So how do you see that these kind of government support would enable us to move faster towards smart mobility in India?
Thank you. Thanks to all the participants, my co-panelists, and of course the Intelligent Summit for inviting me to be a part of it. So yes, India's in one word, of course, I'll have to sound very, very optimistic if I were to say that how exactly it is going to take it, we are going to take it forward. So maybe some kind of milestones if I can recollect as of now. So in March 2019, the National Mission on Transformative Mobility is set up with the kind of mandate that this will be the overarching a kind of a point of contact for a point of a tee-off point from where the entire thing has to be taken forward. And then in the April itself, the same year, 2019, they came out with their strategized with the new FAME 2 scheme after gaining experience from FAME 1. And then this year, we have seen the major initiatives in the form of re-strategizing FAME 2, that is number 1, that came on 11th of June. Before that, it was the PLI scheme for advanced chemistry cell and battery storage. And then it was followed by extension of the scheme up to 2024. Finally, the PLI scheme for the auto components, especially with a lot of emphasis on electric mobility. So we have incentivized the vehicle, number one. We have incentivized the battery. We have incentivized the components of it. So what is probably left is the charging infrastructure, if I might say, and maybe a little bit of R&D initiative. That is what is left. And probably this is the reason why most of those who are with the industry, they say, and this gives a lot of satisfaction, that whatever government wanted to do, whatever government should have done, they have already done. It's the time for us to take it forward. And really, the kind of traction that we are seeing, it's something very, very satisfactory. Let me tell you that majority countries in the world, they agree that the kind of steps that we have taken in last, say, 3 to 4 years, max to max, that has been phenomenal. Because if you see, when we compare ourselves with the Nordic countries, with the Scandinavian ones, with the European countries, then their history, they have got their initiative is a very, very long kind of years they have put in. So for some cases, it has been early 90s, for some it has been late 90s, and for us it is a barely 3 to 4 or max to max 5 years. That is the time span that we have dedicated ourselves to. But the traction that it is bringing about is phenomenal. That is why I am saying that the future is extremely bright. The future is extremely bright. The demand will be tremendous. It is for the OEMs, it is for the industry captains to get into the space and see to it that they are able to satisfy the demands. As far as government's regulatory framework is concerned, you will always see that we will stand by your side. We will keep on making the announcements and bringing them into realities, better and better things, so that the entire electric mobility thing is taken forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. It's truly encouraging to understand and listen from you that yes, worldwide, the India's move towards much safer, much cleaner mobility has been well appreciated, has been well acknowledged. What it took many years for most of the countries, we have tried doing it in over the last few years. But just one additional thought which I would like to you to highlight is that what could be the impediments in your view, which would result into not so successful implementation of these different policies, these different reforms which have been announced by the government?
Well, I presume that if we are able to proliferate the charging infrastructure in a big way, if we are able to kind of spread the awareness campaign in a big way, then I am not able to see any impediment at all. Because as far as I'm watching, that people have evinced a lot of interest, genuine interest in the battery systems, I mean the manufacturing part of it. And of course, automobile component is very new, that will get it traction. So probably these are the areas that are left behind. And very soon you will see, maybe 3 to 4 months, you will see that many of the complaints with regard to non-availability of charging infrastructure will be taken care of. That is the kind of scenario here.
Sure. So what we are hearing is that the government is mindful of the fact that the charging infrastructure, the investment on the R&D, etc., is something which is absolutely crucial for us to have a much more sustainable ecosystem on smart mobility. And there would be some serious thoughts which are on the way to promote as well as to accelerate the R&D or the charging infrastructure spend in India. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sinha. I think continuing our discussion, one of the important aspects when we look at the future of smart mobility or the smart cities is the public transportation system. And we've also heard and we've also seen how the different FAME policies, the different support from the government has also been emphasizing on the public transportation systems. So let me move on to Mr. Nishant Arya and gather his views as to what he believes is critical to revamp the entire public transportation systems, particularly emphasizing on the electric mobility space.
So I think first of all, Mr. Sinha has set the context right for us to really see that from a policy standpoint, how the right enablement is provided to the industry to move forward. And clearly, public transportation is one of the key areas as it is attracting the masses. And the per passenger per kilometer cost is the lowest in the public transportation space. And that is where we are seeing that the highest asset utilization is also there. And therefore, the total cost of ownership, if we see today also, in this area is clearly quite positive, and at an operating level the operating cost of an electric bus versus a diesel bus is less than 50% even, or even in some cases 30 to 40% in different scenarios. So it's very important to understand that how are we taking this to the masses, and how are we able to see a generation to consumption kind of methodology, and clearly seeing that we are generating green energy through renewable sources, where we have a clear program of going to about 500 gigawatts in next 10 years, and aligning that with our electric vehicle program also, whether through FAME 1, FAME 2, and the upcoming FAME initiatives or other initiatives which we see. And here we see that in public transportation space, the challenges are definitely there, but also we have big benefits of parking spaces being available inside the depots, the power infrastructure, and the chargers which can be deployed in depots. And the other thing is that today in our country, like we saw in the telecom space, we took a leapfrog to 5G, 4G straight away. And similarly, in this space today, India is one of the lowest buses per thousand vehicles, per thousand people. So, which is less than 0.5 if I exclude the private operators, only the STU of the vehicles. So, when we have to enhance that, and if we enhance that with electric mobility, I think that's a great opportunity which we have. And bringing in the right set of financial structures and financial institutions to fund this sector is very important, giving it priority lending. On the other hand, how are we able to have very bankable projects in cities which are structured in such a manner, like what we have seen in solar, what we have seen in wind, that initially there were subsidies for the first few years, and then they have caught on like fire, and they have really grown exponentially. So we need to have horses for courses kind of methodology in all the EV areas. So because every EV segment is very different from the other. So if you look at public transportation buses vis-a-vis two-wheelers or three-wheelers, I think every area needs to have its own independent viewpoint, and the customer has different kind of requirements. And what we need to change is that today in different areas in public transport, customer uses it as a need, where they need to use public transport because that is something which they can use, but it's not a choice in many cases. So with this, if we are having safe, green, and comfortable public transport, I think that will change the whole paradigm. At the same time, we can go for high level of digitization with the public transport, where you also mentioned about the common mobility card and few other things which can be very well deployed. Clearly, another point which is there is that in our country we have such a high population and high density routes. If we can choose some key routes, and like the initiative which have been taken for the 9 cities where CESL is getting involved now, if that can be converted further into certain lighthouse projects and the numbers can be enhanced to give a clear perspective, I think we will be able to see real traction, because volumes will be driving down prices and bringing in higher level of commitment from all the manufacturers and mobility providers, and seeing it from a well to wheel perspective clearly. So whether it is the OEMs, whether it is the component manufacturers, charging infra companies, the power distribution, because one challenge which we face in the public transport area, the power consumption is high, and we need high voltage power networks. So for that, if certain steps can be taken, I think that will be very meaningful for the industry to really move forward, along with the focus on skill development and the awareness, so that people who use such kind of transportation system, and especially post COVID, where we see health and environment have played a very key role in the last 1.5 years, and it has totally transformed and changed our way of thinking, if that can be evolved. And on the other hand, there are certain challenges which we face today in terms of the right ecosystem. So if in the PLI scheme, as Mr. Sinha mentioned, if the EV manufacturers for components, for aggregates, can be given priority and can be brought on board, I think that will go a long way in seeing that how we can truly become Atmanirbhar and self-reliant, and ensure that we actually make in India and make for the world, not only for our country. Because in this segment, the biggest benefit is that we are at par with all the global organizations. So there is no different BS1 to BS6 perspectives in different countries. So it's a global market. And in a global market, when you are having such a large scale and domestic demographic dividend, that can really give you that kind of benefit with the local market and having to work in the global market as well. So I think that can be a very good paradigm shift in our approach, and something which we are looking at in terms of catering to the global scenario as well. And in India, if in different cases we see heritage sites, we see many tourist destinations, in those areas where we see high density of people moving around, if we bring in certain mandates to use green vehicles, I think that would be very important, and definitely that will bring in a sea change. And once people experience electric vehicles, they really understand that it's totally noise free, and the kind of benefits they have, the kind of speed the electric vehicles can gain, the maintenance free benefits. So there are multiple things which are there. And then even in staff or school or many other applications, electric buses can be very well deployed. But to start with the common man who can use this in different STUs, and that's where even the battery perspective, I think, needs to be looked at very carefully. Because today we see in most of the cases people are working on battery for the first life, where the battery is being used in any electric vehicle application, and then if people do have challenges that what they would do, whether to go for recycling or something else. So if it's designed properly in the beginning, then it can be used, especially like a bus battery, which is a large battery for energy storage applications, where the DoD and the state of charge requirements are not as intense as the automotive dynamic application. And there the battery life can be there 10 to 15 years, clearly, including the energy storage, second life. And in certain cases, people do talk about third life also as a power backup in different cases. So I think those are certain use cases which can be brought in here. And clearly, where we talk about the AQI, the air quality index, green bonds, and multiple other initiatives which can be brought in to really create a right structure for this area to really take off from here. So that's my perspective, and we as an organization are committed to this domain for the longer term, and clearly seeing that how EV ecosystem needs to be propelled more than only a EV electric bus or any product as such. Because if the EV ecosystem is growing, I think everything else would follow it.
Sure. No, absolutely relevant, Mr. Arya, in terms of the points which you shared with us. I think I really like the point which you talked, where you talked about the usage of buses in the high density areas, and also pushing the usage in areas like school campuses or the college campuses, etc. But just one pertinent point when you talked about the entire ecosystem, the electric vehicle ecosystem. The government is also focusing on alternative fuel technology, whether it is hydrogen or any other fuel technology. What's your view in terms of the public transportation getting adapted to these alternative fuel technologies? Is it something too distant for us to talk about, or is it something which is very close to us?
See, personally, I feel hydrogen may take a few years, probably where electric was about 4 to 5 years back is where I would rate hydrogen being there today. But if you talk about other alternate fuels like CNG or ethanol, other things, I think they'll all coexist. And the market is so large that there'll be space for all these areas. And we as an organization also focus on all the alternate fuels clearly. And definitely there'll be no single solution to a challenge which we have. And replacing idea is eventually if 100% public transport in the next decade can be replaced by all different alternate fuels, because every city would have different kind of fuel availability solutions, and the requirements of the customers would be different based on the geographic and demographic requirements. So I think we will everywhere what we try and see is that there's a customized package for every city and every product, rather than having a standard solution which is made for all.
Okay, so it's going to be a much wider adoption in your view in terms of not only relying on the electric as the option, but alternative fuels will also coexist in the times to come.
Sure, because even if you look at FCEV, so fuel cell, but fuel cell also would have a fuel cell electric hybrid, right? In that case, so electric would be one of the prime movers in this case, and many other technologies would tag along. And definitely there'll be other alternate fuels also, but electric, I would say, would be taking the lion's share in this case, in addition to the other alternate fuels. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. I think moving on and staying on to mobility as the sub theme of this panel discussion, I would like to come to you, Mr. Munjal. When we talk about biking, in India and globally, what we have seen that the biking commuting savings come from multiple sources, from multiple channels, whether it is reduced vehicle ownership or the fuel cost savings or managing the congestion well. But frankly, in India, is there a long way for the masses to really adopt it as a culture? And if yes, then what is that we together as the end users and the government can do to overcome this?
Thank you, Saket. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you, CII Intelligent, for inviting me here. The context has actually been very well set by Mr. Sinha and then Nishant, and I'm totally in sync with what they were saying. Now, let me talk about it, about this, the parking issue that you're talking about, more from a lighter vehicles, the last mile vehicles, the light engineering vehicles. So India, as we all know, is a very large two-wheeler market. 80% of the vehicles on the road are two-wheelers. And those are also the low-hanging fruit. Those are the vehicles which will convert as well, fastest as well, for various reasons. One is, of course, that the battery size is smaller, thereby making the price of these vehicles much lower. Second is to do with that the battery, the difference between the IC engine and electric in terms of the price differentiation has reduced substantially. And we also know for a fact that the market in India is majority of the market is a commuter segment market, whether we look at it from a two-wheeler perspective or from a car perspective, at a very low price point as compared to what it's at a global average. Now, that said, the performance of these vehicles is also much lower than what we look at in other markets that we compare ourselves against. So in terms of the speed, in terms of the CC, in terms of the cost, etc. So the larger vehicles are more difficult to convert because of the infrastructure requirements. They are more difficult to convert because of the price gap that exists. Whereas in two-wheelers, like I said, the gap has reduced, has shrunk substantially, also because of the very strong policies that we've got in place now. So in terms of the policies, we've got the central policy and then we've got numerous state policies. What we anticipate happening going forward is that the market in this segment, in the two-wheeler, is going to expand exponentially in the electric conversion from IC to electric. So the conversion is going to be, as we define this, as the hockey stick growth. So there is going to be very, very rapid conversion. Now, the challenge earlier was to do with the initial purchase price, where, like I said, the gap has reduced. The other factor was that of the TCO, the total cost of ownership, where the gap between the two, IC engine and electric, has actually widened in favor of electric simply because of the oil prices right now. So that is where the conversion is going to happen. Parking in India is a challenge, which is why we remain as a very large two-wheeler market, not just because of parking, but other factors as well. But as we go more towards autonomous, I don't know when autonomous is going to really come into India, but I mean, I can imagine a scenario, maybe not in our lifetime, but maybe the next, to talk about where they could be pods, they could be smaller vehicles which are not really consuming or which are not really in city spaces, and they come in from outside, they drop you wherever you got to go. It's all app based. They drop you where you got to go, and they go out of the city. So ownership is not the primary factor. So people use share mobility more than actually own vehicles. That's something which is going to possibly happen in future. The second factor is, as we go more towards autonomous driving, you can pack more cars or more vehicles on the road as against as what we have right now, simply because AI and MI is going to take over. And you will have a scenario where the distances between the vehicles can be reduced simply because the systems are taking decisions and not humans, and we will not have human errors the way we have right now. Another important factor is that cities will move towards more walking cities or more slower speed, as we're seeing what's already happening in Paris, where Paris has gone into a 30-kilometer limit on the vehicles in most urban areas of Paris. That's another trend which I foresee, which we think is going to happen in more and more cities. And that's a very important one, because what you're doing is you are cutting down on air pollution there, you are cutting down on noise pollution there, and you are making the city more pedestrian and non-polluting vehicles friendly, whether it's bicycles or it's electric vehicles. You're making it more friendly towards that. In order for us to reach there, there are certain steps that we need to take as a country, as smart cities. And some of them are to do more with getting cycling lanes in place, first and foremost. Let's get people out on the cycling lanes. Let's promote more usage. We've already promoted solar very well. We need to push that further. We've got our policies in place, like I said, for electric. Now, there are some missing elements there which need to be taken care of, and which I believe will happen over a period of time. Some of those missing elements are, at this point, we still don't have a concrete goal or target by which we want to convert to electric, or we want to go into the clean mobility space. It's an open-ended target at this point of time. So we need to set those targets. And again, there will be different targets for different forms of vehicles. Two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars, public transport, commercial vehicles, all could have different targets. The fastest one possibly would be the two-wheelers, simply because that's the easiest to convert in that manner. So targets is another key factor. Another factor is that when we set up our goals, when we set up our policies, etc., we need them to be very long-term, because you have to build in the ecosystem that comes in. Whether it's a financing part of it, it's a charging, whether it's a charging infrastructure, it's a supply chain, it's how you sell the vehicles, it's a service of the vehicles, a network, etc. And again, another factor would be that of reskilling of the workforce. Now, to an extent, we are doing a lot of work on this space, where we are reskilling the roadside mechanics to be able to to be the first first gap, to fill the gap for the first, in case of there's a problem with the vehicle, with the minor problems. For major problems, of course, you would go to the dealer network, etc. So this reskilling of the workforce would also cause an ecosystem to be built up, whereby you can easily service your vehicles. And of course, the last factor being a very, very important one, and that is what Mr. Sinha also touched upon, is that of charging infrastructure. At this point of time, we don't really have that in a very dense form. That needs to be extremely dense. And when I look at it from a two-wheeler perspective, all you need is every building, whether it's new or old, should have 15 amp charging points. You don't need very expensive AC/DC charging. You don't need all of that. All you need is 15 amp plug points where you can plug in your vehicles to charge. Because effectively, people will be charging vehicles when it's personal vehicles at home, and you're going to be using these systems for topping up, not for a full charge. So I think there's as we move towards more of a slower speed markets, as we move towards more lighter vehicles, that will free up the roads to a great deal. That will free up the parking spaces. That said, our volume, our number of cars on the road as against our population is, from a per capita standpoint, is already very, very low. So I think it's just traffic management which needs to be managed in a better way, which will actually free up the roads in a substantial manner.
Sure, Mr. Munjal. I think just if you could elaborate on this one particular aspect which you touched upon, on the dedicated infrastructures for the bikes, or the bike lanes. And I'm talking more from a point of view of when we look at smart cities, the way the smart cities are now being designed, are being redeveloped. So do you believe that there is adequate amount of emphasis which is being put in terms of creating those dedicated bike lanes?
There needs to be more. There needs to be more work done on that. We haven't seen any of that come up so far. There needs to be more and much faster work done on that. We're too slow in that process.
And in your view, what's really been the success factor, in the Western countries for it to be a very successful model, wherein those dedicated bike lanes have worked very well?
Saket, these are difficult projects. When you look at it, redesigning of a city is a very difficult project. Yeah. It's the way that our cities are already designed in a certain manner. Whereas we do have cities here which are designed in a very organized manner as well. The likes of Chandigarh, for that matter. You've got adequate and good infrastructure. You've got less traffic on the roads. People are using lighter forms of vehicle in a much more effective manner than in a lot of other parts of the country. So I think it's a lot to do with, again, replanning of some of our cities, and that's going to be a long-term plan. It is about regulations and it's about policies, how that gets implemented and how that gets used.
Sure. But so I think there has to be some convergence when we talk about the future of smart mobility with the smart cities by developing or redeveloping these cities or these towns in a manner which makes the people much more convenient to use the two-wheelers or maybe the bikes in a much more efficient manner or in a much more secured manner, if I can say so.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, as we start creating that infrastructure, we will find people, and if it's a cleaner infrastructure, we will find people moving from the center of cities and moving outwards into these areas where it's a much cleaner environment to bring up the children and, for commute, etc. But it needs to be done in a planned manner where you've got your workplace is not too far from your home, your schools are not too far, and you've got that kind of ecosystem very close by you. So you don't have to travel large distances, because traveling large distances also means burning more fuel, which is again causing to greenhouse gases. So the less you travel using any forms of IC engine vehicle, the better it is for the city, for the environment.
Sure. So I think moving on to or staying on to the mobility as topic of our deliberation, one of the important aspects to be really looked into is the shared mobility. And worldwide, again, we have seen the trends as to how shared mobility has gained much more emphasis, has gained much more popularity. In India also, if we talk about the younger generation, they don't somehow believe in owning a vehicle or owning a residential property for that matter. They believe more on shared mobility. And if you look at car sharing as an option, which again is also changing the way the urbanites move in today's environment. There are many OEMs who have come forward in car sharing as an option. In some parts of the globe, we have also seen how peer-to-peer sharing programs, the car sharing programs, have been running very successfully in India. In those parts of the globe. My question to Abhilesh Kumar, from Uber, would be that: do you believe that India is a potential market for a car sharing programs, or will it still largely remain as a ride sharing market? What would be your views, and what is that globally you are seeing, and what is that you have a point of view from an India perspective?
So if I understand your question correctly, Saket, do you want to understand if India is a potentially great market for peer-to-peer car sharing versus the ride sharing that it currently is?
That's right. That's right. Peer-to-peer car sharing, or maybe the OEMs getting into car sharing models.
So, I mean, as for anybody getting into car sharing market, anybody can get into it, but it requires a ecosystem play. Like, you should be very nimble to be able to work on the ecosystem and to be able to bring together the different elements that can ensure that both sides, like the way we operate in ride sharing, we see that there are two sides of the equation. One is the rider side and the other is the driver side of the equation. And we call them as demand and supply respectively. So what is required is how you can leverage technology in order to ensure the absolute best experience for a rider as well as for the driver. And mind you, the tricky part is that both the sides of the equation have competing priorities, because the driver wants the driver side. The driver partners want to make as much money as they can, and the rider side wants to pay as less as they can. So it's a fairly, I would say, a fairly complex structure in which technology, operations, and I would say process excellence, all of them come together in order to ensure that the system works effortlessly. So to answer the question about do we see multiple multi-industry players getting into ride sharing, I mean, there is nothing that stops it. The only thing is that whoever gets into it, it requires a fair bit of investment, and it requires a lot of these elements coming together for it to become successful. So that would be my answer. And to the second point, do we see that peer-to-peer is an important component or can be a big unlock for car sharing or the market overall in India? The answer is actually yes. And for now, I'm discounting the COVID scenario for the simple reason that we all hope that it's going to be temporary in the larger scheme of things. But as we move forward, uh, right now, if the peer-to-peer scenario opens up in India, then you can see that the sheer volume of supply goes not just by 10x, 100x, but by 10,000 and maybe multitudes of that. And India is a supply constrained market. All the panelists might subscribe to this fact that regardless of the amount of supply you put in the system, the demand is so huge that it will just suck it up completely. So in a supply constrained market as India, if this unlock, the single unlock of allowing peer-to-peer car service to actually not to actually fly, can change the entire dynamics overnight by just a stroke of pen. So the short answer is yes, it has a great potential and it can actually take off, not just for the mobility, but for all types of ecosystems. Because once you give somebody sitting at home an opportunity to monetize their time, let me put it that way, in whichever way they want. It's not just for the mobility as an ecosystem, but think about it, what it does to the ecosystem. That includes the OEMs, that includes the financing players, that includes the ancillary providers. It suddenly raises the stake for everyone in a big way. So we see that to be a great opportunity, and we hope that the world moves in that direction in India.
So, yeah, so if I may ask one thing, I think you shared excellent viewpoint from your standpoint as to how peer-to-peer potentially has has the potential to explode in India. Looking at the market or the demand, which is so huge in comparison to the supply. But do you see it as a threat for ride sharing option?
No, it's not a threat. In fact, it's complementary to the ride sharing option. So ride sharing as it operates in India because of the regulatory mechanism that exists as it is. If it was not, then it would be operating very differently. So I would say that instead of a threat, we look at it as a very complementary, I would say, lever that, if opened, can be a big thing for the industry as a whole.
Okay, so you mean that it could be a different business model altogether to the existing aggregators and the service providers?
I would say yes, it will. More than the business model being different, it is the business model will need to be more evolved. Let me put it that way, because right now, a bulk of what we do in terms of, for example, the licensing requirements or everything is taken care of by the infrastructure that exists on the government side of things.
Right.
So, but once you open it up to the whole world, then it will need to be very different. And how do you manage that? So the processes, the systems, the technology, the connectivity, the smart mobility that you were talking about, all of that will need to be a lot more evolved. And that and that evolution itself, the process itself, provides so many more opportunities to the industry, and it can light a fire in terms of entrepreneurship and everything else within the ecosystem. So, personally, we look at it as a huge opportunity for the overall mobility space.
Sure. No, I really liked it because you touched upon a very important aspect, which is technology. Even whether it is for a ride sharing or for a peer-to-peer sharing, technology plays such a significant role. And the way the technology gets adopted, the way the digitization, and Mr. Arya also touched upon this aspect, is something which is going to be absolutely crucial in whichever way we look at adopting mobility as a service in the times to come. Now, before I actually move on to the other panelists regarding the other sub-themes around technology, let me try bringing in Rushida over here, because I think, Rushida, you have significant amount of experience of dealing with the smart cities. You have seen it so closely. in your experience, how is smart mobility converged with the whole idea of smart cities mission? What is, in your experience, being the success factors? What is something which has not really worked? What are the learnings that we all can have, when we really look at these two aspects, smart mobility in smart cities?
Sure. Thank you very much, Saket, and thanks to all the co-panelists and of course the organizers. So if I may tackle this question, Saket, a little differently, maybe I can talk a little bit about what we do and why we do, and then the link to smart cities and smart mobility. So briefly, I work for the Bernard van Leer Foundation. We are a Netherlands-based organization. We focus on a good start for all children. So we are a philanthropy, have been working in India for the past 30 plus years. And basically, we believe that giving all children a good start in life is the best way to build a happy, healthy, and prosperous society. One of our core initiatives is called Urban 95. And 95 centimeters, 95 signifies 95 centimeters, which is the average height of a healthy 3-year-old child by WHO standards. So basically, this initiative asks city decision makers, government officials, but also all of us who are working in this sector, of what would you do differently if you were to look at a city from the height of 95 centimeters, which is the height of a healthy 3-year-old, of a toddler. And if we look towards mobility and we think about the height of 95 centimeters, we can think about our mobility choices now and how they will influence our future generation. But there is a deeper, more critical reason for this, and that is linked to the reason why we work on mobility now and young children, which is that a lot of early experiences are linked to brain development. So basically, the early years, the first 1,000 days, the first 5 years of a child's life are foundational. Everything that the child learns and does is going to affect economic returns to society. It's going to affect the health and well-being of our society. It is going to affect the educational outcomes, which is basically early childhood, we believe, can power a nation in various ways. And to be able to therefore focus on our cities and mobility is quite important, because young children and their families, of course, their caregivers need different options. They need to be closer to services that are needed for young children, your public health centers, your daycare centers, and so on, the Anganwadis. But they also need just plain greenery and clean spaces outside to be able to walk to be able to have access to. And therefore, how this links to your question on smart cities mission and some of the recent initiatives. This also links to some of the recent trends, I would say, and I think a number of the panelists have also pointed this out, because we talk about this global trend of the 15-minute neighborhood, which is part of what Paris is doing quite well. We see in many cities this focus on neighborhood scale, which also links to this idea of access to services, being closer to where young children and their families are. And this neighborhood scale where with cars, we are seeing this law of diminishing returns kick in, because it's almost easier to walk and cycle to places that are closer to home. And that's where services should be located for young children and their families. And we see this in many cities in Southeast Asia and South Asia, where a lot of focus is on locating things closer to where people live. So in terms of the smart cities mission, the mission itself has taken this up in a big way in terms of bringing the lens of early childhood into the planning and management of cities, and have launched one of the initiatives that they've recently launched in collaboration with us and also with the World Resource Institute. I know Amit is here, so the WRI is also working with us closely on this. They're the main technical partner on nurturing neighborhoods, which is basically focusing on mobility related to walking and cycling and access to public spaces and access to services that are close to where families live. So this also means a lot of focus on data. I know we talk about technology, but definitely thinking about data and how that can be useful for decision makers to make the right decisions of locating services where families are, and so on. So this is in line with global trends, and this is one of the things that we are seeing the mission take on, to your question on converging with smart mobility. And in short, smart mobility is also the walking aspect of it, the cycling aspect of it, And I think some of the panelists have also touched upon Scandinavian countries. And if you think about Scandinavian countries, there is a lot of focus on biking infrastructure and not necessarily always on cars at a local level. And the other thing to keep in mind, I think you asked this question earlier of what are some of the success factors and how these countries may have been able to bring this into their planning and design. One of the things to think about is shared public spaces. Our cars right now, especially at the local level, are taking up a lot of space, but then can this public space be shared between cars and bikes and motorbikes and cycles and pedestrians? So this is a question of both education, but also of thinking differently about how cities are designed and who that public space belongs to. So in conclusion, I think there is a lot that the mission is doing now to bring this lens of proximity and design from a perspective of families, from quality of life, or from the perspective of young children and their families, and a focus on walking, cycling, pedestrianization, and so on. And so we'll see how this trend goes. But we have, under the Nurturing Neighborhoods Challenge, now 63 cities that had applied, because it was basically a competition between cities, and 25 cities are now going through a semi-final stage of modifying what they had proposed, and we'll pick up 10 final cities that will be announced at some point in October. But the larger point here is this is a trend that at least 60 plus cities have taken up and are interested in, and we hope that all the 4,000 plus cities in India will eventually buy into the idea and will focus on neighborhoods that work for young children, because eventually then they will work for all citizens, if you can put that lens on.
Excellent, Ruchira. This is something which is truly exciting. In terms of when we are talking about access to services, the neighborhood. But tell me, just further asking one more question. Is it really something that a mindset change is required for us to get into this kind of a model? What is that a common man can do, in terms of educating the people further, whether it's on account of discipline, whether it's on account of adopting those good practices, the driving behavior, more importantly in India. So what is that which people like you and me can actually contribute to?
So we focus, Saket, we focus a lot on behaviors, because there is a lot going on with this kind of thinking. But a lot of times when we work with cities and we interact with both citizens and decision makers that are in the position of making these changes, what we see is that there is always this desire to work with this lens on. Nobody, if you think about it, nobody will say no to looking at what will work better for a baby or a young child, because of course they are the future of cities. And so we find that this lens of thinking from the point of view of young children is quite effective in convincing both citizens, common people, but also key decision makers in terms of how they can redesign or even think about retrofitting cities. The other thing to mention here, Saket, is that this is not something that is new or something different that we're asking cities to do. But if you think about the Smart Cities mission and a lot of initiatives and projects and programs and infrastructure projects that the cities are already building upon, how can you tweak them just a little bit so that they also include young children and their families? So if you're thinking about sidewalks, can you just make them a little bit lower so that somebody who is holding a young child or has a pram, for instance, can use them? Or if you're thinking about just even without changes, if you're thinking about city traffic light and it changes in 10 seconds and that's enough for an able-bodied young man, but not necessarily for somebody who's holding a child or somebody who's elderly. So it's some of it is, you're exactly right, a change in thinking, a change in mindset and behaviors, and that will be constantly needed. And that push can come from government through the mission, through incentivization, through models like this competition that can really get people excited to participate. And for citizens, I think we are seeing a lot of uptake of citizens as well, because they know that these are issues that they face on a regular basis. So how do you really work with them to say that, look, you are facing this, but there are solutions, and let's work together with your city government to be able to make this a reality. So it is a long-term process. I will not say that this is something that will change in a couple of years, but it is a start.
No, so it seems to be a very inclusive process, I would say, Rishida, the way you have talked about, which involves the citizens, which involves the government bodies, the local municipality bodies, etc. I mean, so it has to be a collective effort to make this transition. Excellent. Amit, if I can move on to you and continuing what Rishita shared with us, when it comes to decarbonization, it's very important that yes, we adhere to those norms. We meet the requirements, of the Paris Agreement. How has WRI, in your experience, been contributing towards this mission? Can you throw some more light onto that?
Sure, Saket, and nice to kind of hear the panelists and their remark in this wonderful last 60 odd minutes. So basically, I think one of the things that we have been working on is it is going to be the, so one is the question is what will be the future of mobility or smart mobility as we're talking. The second is what should be the future of mobility or smart mobility. And so I think those are two slightly different conversations. So the way we look at the future of mobility, so we basically are looking at mobility which does three primary things for us. One, there has to be zero fatalities, traffic fatalities, right? So how is the transport system safe for the most vulnerable section of society, children, elderly, people who walk, people who cycle? So how can you provide safe mobility? And that's where our first approach is the zero traffic fatality. The second thing what we are looking at is zero emission. And zero emission, definitely tailpipe emission is important, but can we also look at overall zero emission? So maybe EV powered with renewable energy. So I think that zero emission is the second outcome that we want from our mobility system. And the third, but probably one of the most important outcome, is this whole issue of zero exclusion. So which means that the mobility system have to work for all the cross section of society. It's not only the rich and the powerful and people who have access to means are able to move, but people from the disadvantaged groups, from the economically lower value section, can also get the desired mobility, right? So we internally are looking at mobility from this 000 approach, which is zero road traffic deaths, zero emission, and zero exclusion. And when we look at mobility from this lens, I think what we have to realize is that mobility is something which is not only confined to the transport planners of the city or the state, but it's a cross-cut function which cuts across various departments, various ministries at various levels of governance. And public agencies are one part of the ecosystem, but there's a much larger ecosystem which excludes outside public agencies. So, for example, how can you get corporates? How can you get civil society? How can you bring in academia? How can you bring it people, the OEMs? So I think so that's the one. So with that background, one of the things that we have recently started looking at, and the reason why we have to also look at specifically from the transport lens, from the emission lens as we talked about, is that if you look at the data, right, and one, I think we have a very massive and diverse transport sector. Second is that, and this is data from IEA or the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, that road transport actually contributes 90% of the total CO2 emissions in India. And that is something which is very, very important for us to understand. And therefore, I think as previously it was said that how the government is moving forward to kind of accelerating electric mobility. And I think this is where we thought that if we have to leverage and streamline electric mobility or just to decarbonize transport in general in India, then we have to create a very favorable ecosystem. An ecosystem that includes diverse stakeholders, as I said earlier, businesses, financial institutions, research organizations, public and private sector. and bring them together to kind of move forward in this common trajectory, so as to speak. So with that background, WRI India along with Niti Aayog actually launched something called a Forum for Decarbonizing Transport, and Naveen was there at the launch, and we were very excited. And so the one thing that this forum intends to do is that how is one to do some regular convenings, because a lot of times we realize is that a lot of convenings that happen is slightly siloed, and we're not hearing the perspective of the other side of the people. So one is to do frequent convening. Second is to kind of identify some pain points, whether it is from the private sector or even the government, which is coming with policies. So how can this be implemented on ground? So identify pain points, and then kind of create a kind of coordinated effort where all the stakeholders come together and towards this common cause. And this is what I'm saying, that our common cause is to have a transport system, mobility system that works for all. So that is something which we launched last month, and we hope that we will very frequently start the second round of convenings through this platform, and eventually this platform could become a forum where diverse ideas come together on a common platform, and which can kind of take the conversation forward. So that is something which we are doing, and we are very excited that this is something which will hopefully create some positive change on ground.
Excellent to hear that, Amit. The mission that you're trying to drive in terms of the decarbonization, and you rightly said, I think it's a joint responsibility. End of the day, it's not a one single institute or an institution who can own up this transformation or this change. It has to be taken completely by the users, by the civil society, by the academia, by the OEMs, everyone. And I think again the point that I would like to highlight is what kind of awareness which can be created, to make the people sensitized about the need and the importance of cleaner environment. And it's really good to know that yes, the younger generation today are much more aware, they are much more educated. At least we have seen in our experience, when they go out to buy a vehicle, they are not only concerned about the mileage which a particular vehicle would be giving, they're more concerned about what are the emission norms which the vehicle is carrying. So I think that's a good shift which we are seeing in the generation, and hopefully with the times to come this will only multiply further as more awareness gets created. Now, moving on to the technology aspect, I think that's been the favorite topic over the last 2 days, where we talked about intelligent, be it shop floor operations, be it intelligent housing, smart homes, etc. And this is where I would like Mr. Viswajit to come in and share his views about how critical is the role of big data. And this could be any, whether it's a structured data or it's an unstructured data that we are talking about, is holding in terms of the dictating the direction of the mobility ecosystem. How this data can be fruitfully used, can be more meaningfully used. What is the advancement that you are seeing in your experience, and how the entire stakeholders can stand benefited by this data which gets generated? Mr. Biswajit, are you there?
He's not there, it seems.
He has disconnected. Problem is that.
Okay. So maybe anyone from the existing panelists would like to pick it up in terms of what's been your experience as far as the data is concerned. As I say, data is the new oil. What's been your experience of using this data more meaningfully, more successfully in your businesses?
Saket, I think I can speak from our perspective.
Sure.
I mean, there is the data that we are capturing. At this point, we are really not utilizing it to the T in terms of what the data analytics could be and how the data could be used. We're using it for very basic things at this point of time. Warranties, the battery usage, heat and beat, the chemistries, whether they're working or not. But there is so much more that you can do with that data, in terms of the road conditions and how that translates into the vehicle and how that data is shared across different vehicles. So there is still a lot of work to be done. So if you look at it from an IoT perspective and telematics perspective, at least in the lighter vehicles, in the two-wheelers, it's just beginning to proliferate. It's not something which is that every vehicle is a smart vehicle. And what we also see is that a consumer doesn't really care so much about that data. It's more the B2B segment where it comes down to the deliveries, etc., where the companies want that data. They want to be able to capture that data and be able to mine that in some shape or form, but not the consumers. We've in fact had numerous examples of consumers where they're coming, please take it off, we don't want it, reduce the price. So that's the kind of first, consumer doesn't really see it in that way. So I think what will happen is as this market matures a little bit more, the electric vehicles, consumers will begin adopting technology also to that extent. At this point, there's been a transition which is happening from the low speed to the city or the higher speed vehicles. Vehicles becoming far more robust than what they were earlier. Consumers adopting them in a much more prevalent fashion. And because of now the subsidies that have kicked in, the prices have come down lower. So I think now these technologies could be deployed to in a much better way. And customers would adopt it in that sense. And that data, once you're capturing it, how do you really, that's going to be basically, it's going to help in the adoption of vehicles, it's going to help in the quality of the vehicles that is coming out. And also if vehicles are talking to each other in some shape or form. Yeah. The factor that remains is that, when you connect these vehicles and using, say, SIM cards, etc., all of those, the customer at this point is not very happy if he's got a recurring cost on account of technology. So that's something which is a bit of a challenge to be managed.
Yeah, you're right. I think we've also seen with our clients how V2V as a technology or V2X as a technology, how typically the vehicles talk to each other, or the vehicles typically would talk to the infrastructure is gaining importance. And you're right, I think the customer may not be so much willing to pay that incremental price for this kind of a service, but it's a value-added services end of the day. There are consumers, there are customers who expect these kind of services to be coming along with the product. Recently, we were having a conversation with one of our clients, and they are actually into predictive diagnosis of the vehicle. And if this kind of a solution can be embedded to a vehicle, certainly the customer would stand to be benefited, wherein they get to know much well in advance as to which component potentially can undergo some kind of a fault or some kind of a, which requires some kind of a repair maybe at the component level. Mr. Arya, I mean, if you could also share your views around how data is critical in your business, how you have adopted digitization as a journey, maybe at a very broader sense, if we could get from you.
See, one is front end perspective and second is the back end perspective. So I'll talk about the front end perspective first. So clearly, if we look at data, so we need to understand the point which you mentioned is very pertinent here, that how the vehicle health management system which we put in place, with that we are able to categorically see that instead of just using proactive maintenance or repair and other activities, we see that we ensure that the vehicle life and each component and aggregate can be analyzed on a real-time basis, and based on the performance parameters they are analyzed and they are replaced, which optimizes the cost of the recurring cost which even Naveen was referring to. The second point is that with this we are also able to reduce the over engineering in certain cases which multiple people from technology background do for creating that extra buffer to ensure that there are no issues, which is very important. But at the same time, if it doesn't strike the right balance, the competitiveness goes for a toss, whether on the battery side or even on the charger side. And it really helps on the integration side with the charging infra as well, where we want to see that how are we reducing the downtime and the time to market for those vehicles for charging, and that reduces the speed of charging also if the integration is done properly and the data management is done. That's on the front end. On the back end, why it is so essential is when you have such customers who are looking for the best in class products. So we use this in our manufacturing. So complete AI, machine learning, IoT, and big data is seeing that how first time right, every time right vehicle is being produced. And clearly the tracking and traceability for each and every product being manufactured to the T is essential today. So that any customer having any issue, so we can trace it back to the nut and bolt of the vehicle which is being produced. So that is something which we have deployed in all our facilities, and everything is digitally managed. And that also helps us to ensure that how the facilities are being run are able to meet the requirements which we are setting for as digitization. Earlier organizations used to be talking about sales business vision. So now we also set our digitization visions for every not 5 years, because then you become dated. So we said every 2 year digitization visions are being set in our organization, where we ensure that with that, how are we ensuring that we are having cutting edge technology, integrating all different parts of even product life cycle management or manufacturing or engineering. And on the other hand, at a front end, we are able to give the best in class service to our customers, which is most important here. And when you have organizations and customers who are really seeing that their operating mechanics are such, especially in public transportation, where they look at 98%, 99%, 97% uptime from the vehicles, which is one of our core strengths in our organization. And we provide so without even extra vehicles to our customers. So I think that becomes even more critical because the dependence on the vehicle is even higher. So we have to ensure that the vehicles are performing based on our commitments, or even better than that performance, so that our products are the products which they are clearly banking upon for their services. So digitization is actually the heart of the system and the brain of the system in multiple ways, for generating the data and for data analytics being used for providing the best in class services.
Excellent, very important. Mr. Biswajit, would you like to come in and share your perspective? Because you manage the large AI Center of Excellence.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much. I think, yeah. So, yeah, autonomous driving or the digitization for the automotive industry is, I think, the next one. And it is doing, I would say, doing a lot to improve the last mile connectivity and data-based services. So I kind of draw a parallel what happened in the telecom industry. Like earlier, we used to pay a lot of money for our voice calls, and every voice call used to cost so much. And today, the cost of calls are much less. Data is becoming available. So what is actually happening is the data or the monetization of the services or the value-added services has gone up so much that the cost of the call and other, even though we are using much better technology and better infrastructure, but we are paying much less for per voice call or per data call. Similarly, for the car, the cost of cars, I mean, already at the very high end, and it has to reach to a lot of people. So how to bring down the cost of the car? I mean, you really cannot do anything unless you really do these services. So if you monetize the data, if you do a lot of services, if you add some value-added services, that actually will subsidize the price of the car. And I think that is what trend we are seeing as the software content in the car is increasing, and that is actually changing the whole game. So it is becoming like you own a car, or in fact, as the mobility of service and other things comes, the cost per unit of ownership of the car is going to be coming down and down. And why that is possible, or why that is becoming possible? Because the services which are getting added, be it fleet management, traffic management, the way we manage our insurances. So all these are data driven, and there is, I think there is an industry need to kind of bring this data into a framework, because there are two kinds of data in automotive industry. We see the on-car data, or the data generated by the car itself, which is usually the very high speed and very high throughput real time. And there is the off-car data, or the off-vehicle data. So off-vehicle data is basically the data getting generated by every other subsystems, like, for example, the dealership data, the sales data, so all the data which is like as you move from one point to point, your map data. So all these data are the off data. So the data framework which this industry needs is basically combine all these different on data and off data, vehicle data, fleet data, your family owned car data, etc. So if you combine all of these data sets, then you generate or you create a potential for a lot of these services. And we are actually working on many of these. And one of our key mandate is to create these data services, create this platform technology framework. Like it's like data as a service. You give the tools and frameworks so that people can develop services on top of it and can develop just like the way the mobile technology has evolved or the app services got evolved. So you actually you love the apps rather than you loving your phone. So it's basically a phone is nothing but a collection of hundreds of apps. So similarly in the car, I mean, you have the same corollary coming. So you have a set of services, you have a set of database value-added services, which is going to be your opportunity of the future. So when car is nothing but a data on wheel, so that's become a proverb now in the industry. So that's what I would summarize as how the data-driven things are going to reduce the cost of the car, the ownership of the car, and bring a set of services. And mobility as a service is one of its many.
No, very right, Mr. Biswajit. But just one thing which I'm very curious to understand from you, that despite we being such a data-driven, economy, I mean, in terms of the products or the services, whatever we call, there is always a risk of data theft which exists. There is always a risk of data breach also which exists. So to what extent, when we talk about these technologies to be deployed in the vehicles, etc., are there adequate amount of standards globally which exist for us to prevent these kind of security risks?
Yes, I think that is a very genuine concern about the moment we go for a data-driven industry or data-driven services. So, and data is one of the easier way to infiltrate and get into the thing. So, I would say that automotive industry is far better prepared compared to the other industries. Like we work across different verticals. For us, data is data, be it is in media and entertainment, communications, or in the automotive. So, I would say the automotive is well prepared for this. The components and framework like this AutoSAR we use, and so they are far more well thought out and designed. And data is encrypted. Every CAN signals, which is actually one of the that is the backbone communication system in a car. So that's a very very well secure way. So only a vendor with authorized access can possibly get into the signals. So there are, of course, pitfalls. It is not like a silver bullet which can solve all the problems. So, but I would say that automotive industry is better prepared compared to other industries. There are well standards and practices in place. And when I work with our counterparts in customers' place and things, there are a lot of emphasis given on data protections, identity hiding, or anonymization of the data. For example, when you work with driver authentications or driver-based or ADAS systems, so we make sure that we do not use the data which can compromise somebody's personal security, or it can compromise somebody's the personal information. So some of these things are very very crucial, and that is used with or there is a stringent coding practices. There are stringent methodologies. When it comes to the AI and machine learning, we use it is mandated by our customers and our whoever we work with, that model has to be explainable, etc. The code has to be the decision process should be visible and all that. So lot amount of those good practices and learnings have been built in place. The processes are in place, and the frameworks and systems are in place to make sure that some of these fears or some of these early failures we have seen in other areas do not compromise. And I would say I have not seen much horror stories in terms of data breach or things in automotive industries as much you see in other areas. So I would be a little optimistic here to say that yes, data security wise, we are better here.
And sorry, and you believe that we are also adequately equipped to manage any kind of incidents which may occur? I mean, we as in not only the end consumer, but the OEMs and the service providers.
Yeah, so so the way the tools and frameworks are being developed, and this automotive industry. So as I also mentioned that the software content is going up. So we have this ecosystem of OEMs, then we have tier one vendors, then people like us, so like software developers. So earlier this used to be like very different silos, like these tier one companies who are in charge of giving the components. They own the software, so you cannot actually break it and all that. But now the software, as the software content is coming, so OEMs are actually taking more ownership of the softwares. So earlier the software ownership used to be with the tier ones, like who used to supply the components. So OEM, I mean, you won't believe, OEMs sometimes may not have any clue which software is being used and what is being used. So that was the clout and power of these tier ones. But I think OEMs are realizing these software needs very important part. It is not just the tires or axle or the hardware components. It is the core software which is essential asset of the car. So they are bringing more and more control to it. They are ensuring the code and the software which goes inside is thoroughly tested, well covered, and it goes through a stringent. So OEMs are very good in doing all of that. I think that's some of these are getting into the process and working day in out with them. We see those very less chance. We cannot for sure say the thing will happen and everything is all right and good. But yes, there are protections and measures taken to do those or prevent those situations.
Agreed. I think that's where I could resonate to what Mr. Munjal talked some time back, that there is a need for reskilling and upskilling. So the more technology-based products or the vehicles are becoming, we need to have the skilled manpower to manage or to detect the errors into those components, into those sensors or the advanced technologies which are being used. And hence there is a need for reskilling or upskilling those skill sets. So great, thank you very much. I think with this, we have come to an end of this session, the session 5 on the future of smart mobility. We had excellent views from all of you, not only talking about from a policy standpoint, but more from a mobility standpoint. We heard how public transportation is going to play a significant role, how individual transportation will also play a significant role, what role the agencies like WRI or Rushida and her team are playing in terms of creating an excellent amount of awareness amongst the people. We had views from Mr. Kumar talking about car sharing and the ride sharing as an option. And certainly the technology, which is the backbone of today's any business, if we look at what really and how really is the technology evolving, what are the threats, what are the challenges. I think you summarized it very well, Mr. Biswajit. So thank you very much. Thank you all the panelists. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you. And thank you again. And thank you, CIA. With this, we'll come to an end of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Saket. Thank you, CIA.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Saket.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.